The interstellar void within the Imperium's galaxy is a pitch-black freezing ocean where life is but a fleeting error. On the command deck of the light cruiser Fervent Decree, Captain Aelin Thawne gripped the railing of his command throne. The air was thick with the stench of ozone from the Geller field generators and the suppressed fear of the crew. Warning runes across the cogitator consoles flashed a catastrophic crimson, signaling an anomaly that defied classification. "Report," Thawne demanded, struggling to maintain the calm veneer of a veteran officer. "Unknown anomaly." "Captain," the Sensorium officer reported via Voxcaster, his voice trembling. "Readings indicate a breach in real space, but absolutely no sign of warp energy. It should not exist." Thawne's augmented bionic eye zoomed in on the image projected onto the main view screen. What materialized there caused him to hold his breath. Floating in the absolute vacuum, where temperatures hovered near absolute zero and lethal radiation could cook a man in seconds, was a man. His bald head reflected the cold starlight. He wore a cheap-looking mustard yellow bodysuit, with a white cape billowing behind him as if he were standing in a gentle terrestrial breeze, rather than the deathly stillness of space. No protective void suit, no life support equipment. "In the name of the Golden Throne," Thawne whispered, unconsciously making the sign of the Aquila across his chest. "What manner of Xenos filth is this? Some new form of biocamouflage?" As if hearing the thought, the figure turned. Those lifeless dead fish eyes stared straight at Thawne through the thick hull of the ship. Then, the stranger raised a hand, a gesture of greeting so casually ridiculous under the circumstances. "Open a Vox channel," Thawne ordered. "Demand its surrender or ... But before the communications officer could comply, the man vanished. There was no blinding flare of teleportation technology. He simply ceased to be there between one beat of an artificial heart. Klaxons wailed. "Full sensor sweep. Find it." Thawne screamed. "Captain ... The Sensorium officer's voice cracked with terror. He is inside the ship. Main hangar deck." The main hangar deck reeked of promethium fuel and machine oil. The strange visitor stood there, encircled by a ring of tech priests muttering binary prayers and naval armsmen training their Helgans upon him. He scratched his bald head, looking around at the massive Gothic machinery with mild curiosity. "Hey," he said, his voice flat. "Is this Earth? Everything looks different here." Magos Delphinius, a high-ranking tech priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus, stepped forward. His body was a complex mass of machinery beneath red robes. He extended a mechadendrite toward the intruder, scanners attempting to analyze the creature's structure, but failing. "You stand aboard a vessel of the Imperial Navy belonging to the God Emperor," the tech priest proclaimed through his synthesized vocalizer. "Identify your species and purpose. Compliance is mandatory." The man blinked. Yeah. I'm Saitama, human, just a hero for fun." The Helgans did not waver. The concept of hero for fun was utterly alien in a universe where every action must serve humanity's survival. "This vessel is bound for the hive world of Veus Magna," Delphinius stated coldly. "Based on your anomalous nature, you will be detained and remanded to the Inquisition for judgment." Saitama shrugged, an indifferent gesture. "Sure, whatever. Is there a canteen around here? I'm kinda hungry." Meanwhile, 300 kilometers beneath the polluted skies of Veus Magna, deep within the forgotten sublevels of Hive Tertius, a nightmare was taking shape. Green skin, orc spores had found fertile ground in the damp darkness. In 3 Terran years, they had developed into a full-blown WAAGH, led by the brutal warboss Grimskull Dakahammer. The first sign of infection was when level 219 suddenly went silent. All Vox transmissions ceased. When the Adeptus Arbites sent forces down, They found only blood-splattered corridors and crude, skull icons carved into the walls. By the time the fervent decree achieved orbit, the uprising had devoured 4 more levels. The Planetary Defense Force, PDF, was losing ground at level 214. Their weapons useless against the tide of green muscle. Governor Lux Halbane stood in his stratageum, his face pale as he looked at holographic projections of the affected areas. How long until Imperial Guard reinforcements arrive? He asked his aide with panic. 3 standard days, my lord, she replied. The 84th Cadian has been rerouted. Halbane nodded grimly. Can we hold out? The silence was answer enough. The governor turned to the third person in the room, a tall figure in a high-collared coat of deepest black. Inquisitor Morton Helbrant of the Ordo Xanos was observing the screens with cold eyes. I have reviewed the reports from the Fervent Decree, Helbrant said, his voice sharp. Regarding that anomalous individual, yes, Inquisitor? Halbane asked. I want him. With all due respect, Halbane protested weakly. We are facing an orc uprising threatening the entire hive. Do not presume to direct my attention, Governor. Helbrant cut him off. The orcs are a known threat. This stranger is not. In the Imperium's calculus, the unknown is always more dangerous. Have him brought to the orbital station. I will interrogate him personally. Safama sat in a holding cell on the orbital station, staring at the adamantium wall with a bored expression. The room was designed to contain the most dangerous Xenos monsters, protected by void shield generators. The door hissed open. Inquisitor Helbrant entered, followed by a heavily armed squad. His psychic hood framed the Inquisitor's gaunt face. So, Helbrant began, you claim to be human from ancient Terra? And a hero for fun? Saitama looked up. Yeah, it's just a hobby. The Inquisitor circled him, studying him. You survived in vacuum without protection. You bypassed Geller fields and void shields without effort. These are not human capabilities. Not even Astartes. Saitama scratched his ear. I just train a lot. 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10 kilometers run every day. And remember never to use the air conditioner. A cold, skeptical smile touched Helbrant's lips. I see. Do you take me for a fool? To determine your nature, I will need to conduct a thorough examination. Very painful. An urgent alarm tone sounded from Helbrant's wrist communicator. My lord, a breathless voice reported, amidst gunfire. The Greenskins have breached the level 214 perimeter. They are pouring up. Casualties are catastrophic. The war boss. He is too strong. The Inquisitor's face darkened. Deploy the Adeptus Arbites reserves. Do not let them rise higher. Throughout this exchange, the boredom on Saitama's face began to dissolve. So, there's a fight going on? He asked, standing up from the metal chair. Helbrant glanced at him, annoyed. Yes, a Xenos infection threatens this world, but that is not your concern. You will remain here. Sama stretched lazily. Actually, that sounds exactly like my thing. Monsters threatening people. That's hero work. You will remain here until I permit it, Helbrant stated coldly, hand on his bolt pistol. This is the mandate of the Inquisition. Nah, Saitama replied, walking toward the door. I'm going to go check it out. Maybe this time there'll be a decent fight. Before anyone could react, the bald man simply stepped forward. The thick adamantium bulkhead in front of him, designed to withstand artillery shells, crumpled like parchment under an invisible impact force. The void shield generator flared and died in a rain of sparks. Klaxons wailed throughout the station as atmosphere began to vent through the hole. Stop him! Helbrant screamed, losing his composure for the first time. The soldiers opened fire, but Safama was already gone, leaving behind an enraged Inquisitor and a gaping hole in a supposedly unbreakable wall. The uninvited guest had decided to join the party. The stench of the underhive was a physical assault, a miasma of burnt promethium, unwashed bodies, fungal rot, and the coppery tang of fresh blood. But as Saitama descended into the depths of Hive Tertius, a new, more pungent odor overpowered it all, the musky, feral reek of countless greenskins. Level 214 was a charnel house. The PDF barricades, built from overturned HAB units and scrap metal, had been overrun. The floor was slick with a grotesque mixture of human blood and thick green orc ichor. Bodies lay scattered, both Imperial defenders in flak armor and lumbering brute creatures clad in crude, bolted together scrap metal. The roar of the WAAGH echoed through the cavernous manufactorum halls like a physical force. It wasn't just a sound. It was a psychic wave of primal aggression that hammered at the minds of all present. In the center of the carnage stood Commissioner Thade. His black Arbite's armor was dented and scorched, his helmet torn away to reveal a face grimed with soot and blood. He stood atop a pile of rubble, chainsword revving in one hand, bolt pistol barking in the other. Around him, the remnants of his squad fought back to back, a shrinking island of Imperial defiance in a rising sea of green muscle. Hold the line. Thade bellowed, his voice raw. For the Emperor. For Veus Magna. A massive shape tore through the ranks of lesser orcs, tossing them aside like ragdolls. Warboss Grimskull Daka Hammer towered over the battlefield, a mountain of green muscle encased in mega armor cobbled together from salvaged tank plating. His left arm ended in a twin-linked shooter that spat a ceaseless stream of high-caliber rounds, chewing through cover and flesh alike. In his right, he gripped a massive power claw, energy fields crackling around its rusted blades. WAAGA. Grimskull roared, his voice a thunderclap that shook dust from the ceiling high above. Stomp da ummies. Smash dear shiny bits. He charged towards Thade's position, the ground shaking with each thunderous footfall. PDF troopers fired desperate volleys, but their last bolts merely scorched the warboss's thick armor. Serving only to enrage him further, Thade braced himself, raising his chainsword in a futile gesture of defiance. This was it. The end of the line. He could only hope to die a death worthy of the Emperor's servants. And then, between one blink and the next, the battlefield changed. A yellow blur cut through the smoky air. One moment, Thade was facing down a charging mountain of orcoid fury. The next, a man in a cheap-looking yellow suit and a white cape was standing between them. Saitama landed softly amidst the gore, not a speck of dirt on his pristine white boots. He looked up at the towering warboss, his expression one of mild curiosity, completely oblivious to the carnage around him. "Hey," Saitama said, his voice flat, cutting through the roar of battle. "You're being too loud. You're disturbing the neighbors." The entire battlefield seemed to freeze. The orcs lowered their weapons, confused by the sudden appearance of this small, unimpressive ummy. Grimskull skidded to a halt, his beady red eyes widening in surprise, then narrowing in savage amusement. "What's this den?" The warboss growled, leaning down to peer at the newcomer. "A shiny new runt for me to squish? Or maybe one of dem weird boys in a fancy dress?" He prodded Sana's chest with a massive armored finger, letting out a booming laugh that sounded like grinding gears. "You look soft, little ummy. Like a squig with no teeth." Saitama sighed, dusting off the spot where the warboss had touched him. "Look, I'm just a guy who's a hero for fun." "Are you the leader of these guys?" Grimskull straightened up, puffing out his massive chest. "I am Warboss Grimskull Daka Hammer, biggest and baddest orc on this whole Zagenrock. I'm gonna smash this hive flat and build a gargant so big it'll stomp the stars." Okay, I get it," Saitama interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "You're the boss. So if I beat you, will everyone else go home?" The audacity of the question sent a ripple of shock through the Imperial defenders. The orcs, however, found it hilarious. They howled with laughter, slapping their knees and pointing at the delusional little human. Grimskull grinned, revealing a maw full of jagged metal teeth. "Beat me, you?" He raised his massive power claw high. "All right, Runt. I'll humor ya. Let's see what you got." With a roar, Grimskull brought the claw down. It was a blow meant to tear open a lemon rust battle tank, powered by hydraulic pistons and crackling energy fields. It moved with terrifying speed for something so massive. Saitama didn't move. He didn't dodge. He simply raised his left hand. Clang. The sound was deafening, a metallic shriek that echoed through the hive level. The shockwave of the impact blew back nearby orcs and PDF troopers alike, shattering lumen strips and sending clouds of dust raining down from the ceiling. When the dust cleared, a tableau of impossibility was revealed. Saitama stood exactly where he had been, his feet planted firmly on the blood-slicked floor. He had caught the massive power claw with one open palm. The energy fields crackled angrily against his yellow glove, but seemed unable to penetrate it. Grimskull stared, his red eyes bulging from his skull. He strained, the pistons in his mega armor whining in protest as he tried to push the claw down, to crush this insignificant human. But Sayama's arm was immovable, like a pillar of adamantium rooted in the planet's core. "Is that all?" Saitama asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. The warboss roared in fury and disbelief. He wrenched his claw free and unleashed a flurry of blows, a whirlwind of metal and energy. He swung, he thrust, he tried to crush, putting every ounce of his monstrous strength into the assault. Saitama parried each blow with casual ease. He slapped the claw aside, ducked under a sweeping strike, caught a downward chop with his forearm. It looked less like a desperate battle for survival and more like a bored adult playing with an overly aggressive toddler. "You're pretty strong for a green guy," Saitama acknowledged, dodging another strike. "But you're kinda slow." Grimskull, now frothing at the mouth with rage, leaped back and unleashed a torrent of fire from his twin-linked Shuda. Hundreds of high-caliber rounds poured towards Saitama, a wall of lead and fire. Saitama sighed. He raised his right hand and flicked his wrist, a motion so fast it was invisible to the naked eye. The wall of bullets vanished. They didn't just stop or deflect. They were gone, vaporized in midair by the sheer air pressure generated by his hand movement. The resulting shockwave knocked Grimskull backward, sending him crashing into a support pillar that buckled under the impact. The warboss shook his head, dazed, pulling himself out of the wreckage of the pillar. He looked at the human, for the first time feeling a flicker of something an orc rarely experienced. Doubt. W-O. "What are ya?" Grimskull growled, his voice lower now, less boastful. "I told you," Saitama said, walking slowly towards the massive orc. "I'm just a hero." He cocked his right fist back. It wasn't a dramatic wind-up, just a simple, casual movement. Normal punch. He threw the punch. It didn't look special. It wasn't thrown with blinding speed, nor did it crackle with energy. It looked like a perfectly ordinary punch thrown by a perfectly ordinary man. It connected with the center of Grimskull's chest armor. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. The warboss looked down at the fist pressed against his thick plating, confused. Then, physics caught up. There was no explosion, no fiery blast. Instead, there was a sound like the universe itself tearing open. A cone of pure kinetic force erupted from the point of impact, traveling straight through Grimskull's body. His mega armor, his tough green flesh, his reinforced bones, they didn't shatter. They didn't break. They were atomized. The force continued onward, a towering wave of destruction that obliterated everything in its path for 300 meters. It carved a perfect, smooth-walled tunnel through blast doors, ferrocrete walls, machinery, and dozens of unfortunate orcs who had been standing behind their leader. The tunnel extended through 6 levels of the Hive City, punching a hole straight out into the toxic atmosphere of Veus Magna before dissipating, where Warboss Grimskull Dakahammer had stood. There was nothing but a fine red mist hanging in the air, slowly settling under the yellow glove of the man who had unmade him. Silence. Absolute. Stunned silence. The roar of battle had ceased instantly. Every eye, human and orc, was fixed on the bald man in the yellow suit. Saitama lowered his fist, looking down at the red mist on his glove with a sigh. "Dang it," he muttered. "One punch again. I got my glove dirty." The remaining orcs stared at the empty space where their invincible leader had been just seconds ago. The concept of invincible had just been brutally redefined. A collective shudder ran through the green horde. Their primal connection to the WAAGH energy, fueled by the Warboss's confidence, shattered. Panic took hold. With a collective howl of terror, the orcs turned and fled. They trampled each other in their desperate haste to get away from the yellow-suited demon, scrambling back into the shadows of the Underhive from whence they came. Commissioner Thade lowered his chainsword, his arm trembling. He looked at the carnage, at the impossible tunnel carved through the hive, and then at the unassuming man standing in the center of it all. "Emperor, preserve us," he whispered, his voice cracking. He dropped to one knee, making the sign of the Aquila with shaking hands. A miracle. A living miracle. Around him, his surviving troopers followed suit, kneeling in awe and fear before the bald savior. Saitama scratched his head, looking uncomfortable with the sudden reverence. He looked around at the kneeling soldiers, then down at Thade. You guys can stand up now," he said. "The big green guy is gone. You should probably call someone to fix that hole in the wall." He turned and started walking away, back towards the upper levels, his white cape fluttering slightly in the draft from the new tunnel. "Man," he said to himself, his voice echoing slightly in the stunned silence. "I hope I didn't miss the sale at the supermarket. I need eggs." The news of the miracle at Hive Tertius spread through Veus Magna not like wildfire, but like a contagion of hope in a body long since resigned to despair. It began as whispers in the Underhive, carried by terrified gangers and fleeing mutants who had witnessed the impossible. A man in yellow, they breathed in the dark corners of drinking dens. He stopped the Warboss with one hand. He unmade him with a single blow. A god in human form. From the Underhive, the stories filtered up to the manufacturing levels. Exhausted workers, hunched over assembly lines churning out Laskin power packs, passed the tale along with their localized vox beads. "Did you hear? The greenskins are rooted." A golden warrior descended and smote their leader. He punched a hole straight through the hive. By the time the shift whistles blew, the whispers had become a roar. In the hab blocks, families huddled around jury-rigged data slates, watching grainy, shaky-picked captures recorded by security servitors that had miraculously survived the battle. The footage was blurry and chaotic, but the central event was undeniable. A massive orc warboss, a creature that could tear a tank apart, reduced to red mist by a single casual punch from a small bald man. "Praise the Emperor," cried a woman in Heb Block Delta 9, clutching a tarnished Aquila pendant. "He has sent us a savior, a living saint to deliver us from the Xenos filth." Her neighbor, a grizzled factory foreman, nodded in agreement, his eyes wide with awe. "Did you see the power? That wasn't no Astartes. That was something else. Something divine." Within hours, crude shrines began to appear in worker dormitories and communal halls. Makeshift altars adorned with candles and scrap metal bore crudely drawn images of a bald figure in a yellow suit with a white cape. People knelt before them, offering prayers not just to the golden throne on distant Terra, but to the saint of the one punch, the savior who walked among them. Street preachers, sensing the shift in the spiritual tide, abandoned their usual sermons of damnation and sacrifice. Instead, they stood on crate boxes in crowded hab markets, their voices amplified by crackling voxcasters, proclaiming the arrival of the Emperor's champion. "Behold," bellowed Brother Matthias, a firebrand preacher with a scarred face. "The Emperor's light shines upon Veus Magna. He has seen our suffering and sent his fist to crush our enemies. Repent, for the hour of judgment is at hand, and it wears a yellow suit." The cult grew exponentially, fed by the desperation of a populace pushed to the brink. In a universe of grim darkness, Saotama was a beacon of impossible light, a tangible proof that humanity was not abandoned, while the lower hives celebrated. A very different mood prevailed in the gilded spires of the upper hive. In the stratagem of the governor's palace, the mood was one of stunned disbelief and growing panic. The tactical hololiths, which hours ago had shown a hive on the verge of collapse, now displayed a rapidly retreating green tide. The Orc Wog, headless and demoralized, was dissolving back into the shadows of the underhive. Governor Lux Hellbane stared at the screens, his jaw slack. It's impossible," he stammered. "The war boss, vaporized? And the tunnel? The structural damage to Hive Tertius is catastrophic. Who? What could do such a thing?" He turned to the shadowy figure standing in the corner. "Inquisitor Hellbrant, what have you unleashed upon my world?" Inquisitor Morton Hellbrant did not answer immediately. He was reviewing the same security footage for the 20th time on his personal data slate, his face a mask of cold calculation. He replayed the moment of impact, frame by frame, analyzing the sheer, impossible physics of the blow. "I unleashed nothing, Governor," Hellbrant finally said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This anomaly unleashed himself." He tapped the data slate, freezing the image on Sephoma's bored expression just before the punch. "Look at him. No psychic phenomena. No warp energy spikes. No technological augmentation detected by our scanners. Just raw, unadulterated physical force on a scale that defies all logic. Is he a demon?" Hellbane whispered, voicing the fear that gripped them all. "A warp entity in human guise? If he were a demon of Korn, he would be reveling in the slaughter," Hellbrant replied, shaking his head slowly. "If he were of Slanesh, he would be drawing out the agony. This efficiency. This utter lack of emotion. It is alien to the warp." A new figure entered the stratagem. Magos biologist Thurin of the Adeptus Mechanicus, his red robes rustling as he moved on multiple mechadendrite limbs. His augmetic eyes glowed with a cold, analytical light. "Lord Inquisitor Governor," the Magos intoned, his voice a synthesized monotone. "I have completed my preliminary analysis of the data from Hive Tertius. The energy output required to achieve the observed destruction. It approaches the theoretical maximum for kinetic force application within a localized area. It is fascinating." "Fascinating?" Hellbane sputtered. "It's terrifying." "Magos, what is he?" "The data is inconclusive," Thurin admitted, his mechadendrites twitching with frustration. "The subject's biology appears baseline human, yet his capabilities exceed those of a Primarch. There are no records of such a mutation, no architect that could produce this result. He is a singularity, an impossibility made flesh." Hellbrant stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "An impossibility that is now loose in your city, Governor, and one that is rapidly becoming a focal point for unsanctioned religious fervor." He gestured to another screen, showing live pic feeds from the lower hives. Crowds were gathering, chanting, waving banners with the crude, yellow-suited figure. The ecclesiarchy's control was slipping. "The people are calling him a saint," Hellbane said, his voice trembling. "If we try to stop him, we could have a full-blown rebellion on our hands." "And if we do not control him," Hellbrant countered, his voice icy. "We may face something far worse than a rebellion. We have no idea of his allegiance, his goals, or the limits of his power. For all we know, he could decide to punch this planet in half next, just because he's bored." The Inquisitor turned to the Magos. "Thurin, I want you to mobilize every available scanner, every Auspex array. Find him, track his every movement. I want to know when he eats, when he sleeps, and especially when he looks like he's about to throw another punch." "As you command, Lord Inquisitor," the tech priest replied. Already transmitting binary orders to his underlings, Helbrant turned back to the governor. "Helbane, put your PDF on high alert. Not to fight the orcs, but to contain the populace. Institute a curfew. Clamp down on the Vox networks. We must control the narrative before this cult of the one punch spirals out of control." But what if he is sent by the Emperor?" Helbane asked feebly. Helbrant fixed the governor with a stare that could freeze Prometheum. "The Emperor works through his appointed servants, Governor. Through the Inquisition, the Astartes, the Ecclesiarchy. He does not send wandering vagrants in ridiculous costumes to perform unsanctioned miracles." He paused, his hand resting on the hilt of his power sword. "But if he is a weapon, then he is a weapon that must be wielded by the Imperium, or destroyed before it can be turned against us." He turned away, staring out the armored viewport at the sprawling hive city below. A city now buzzing with a dangerous new energy. "Find him," Helbrant whispered to himself. "Find the anomaly. And God Emperor help us all if we cannot control him." While the high and mighty plotted and panicked, Saitama was currently standing in a long queue at a mid-level hab market. He had finally found a grocery store that wasn't looted or on fire. He sighed, checking the time on his cheap watch. "Man, this line is moving slow," he muttered to himself. "I hope they still have those Mega Seal noodles left. I'm starving after all that walking." The woman in front of him turned around. She was clutching a small brass aquila, and her eyes went wide as she recognized the bald head and the yellow suit from the pickcasts. "By the throne... She gasped, her voice trembling. It's him. The saint." She dropped to her knees right there in the noodle aisle, bowing her head. "Bless me, Holy One. Bless me and my family." Saitama blinked, looking down at the prostrate woman. The people behind him in line also realized who he was, and immediately fell to their knees, a ripple of reverence spreading through the market. Saitama scratched his cheek, looking uncomfortable. "Could you guys stand up? You're blocking the aisle. I just want to buy some noodles." He looked over the heads of the kneeling crowd towards the noodle shelf. It was empty. "Aw man," he sighed, a look of genuine tragedy crossing his face. "Sold out again." The reprieve Vius Magna enjoyed after the breaking of the Orc Wog was short-lived. The celebration of the one-punch saint in the lower hives was brutally interrupted by a new, far more terrifying sound than the roar of greenskins, the shrill, psychic scream of the Tyranid hive mind. Deep void augur arrays, previously focused on the greenskin threat within the hive, suddenly screamed a new warning. A massive biofleet had translated from the warp at the system's edge, bypassing the outer pickets with terrifying speed. "Hive fleet, behemoth splinter," Magos Thurin reported in the governor's stratageum, his synthesized voice betraying a flicker of machine panic. Designation: Tendril gargantua. Estimated biomass: sufficient to consume Vius Magna within 3 standard Terran days. Governor Helbane stared at the hololith display, his face draining of color. The red icons representing the Tyranid bioships were a swarm of locusts, closing in on the single green sphere of his world. "Emperor, save us," he whispered. "We have no fleet assets to intercept. The Cadian 84th is still days away." The orbital defense platforms cannot repel a force of this magnitude. He turned to Inquisitor Hellbrant, desperation in his eyes. What do we do, Lord Inquisitor? Do we initiate exterminatus protocols? Deny the Great Devourer its prize? Hellbrant stood immobile, his gaze fixed on the approaching doom. Not yet, Governor. Exterminatus is a final resort. We still have assets on the ground. We still have the anomaly, the saint. Cardinal Drovan, the ranking ecclesiarchy official on Veus Magna, stepped forward. He was a gaunt man with eyes that burned with fanatical fervor, and he had been quick to capitalize on the Saitama phenomenon, framing it as a divine intervention. Yes, the Emperor has sent his champion for this very moment. We must rally the faithful behind him. Hellbrandt's lip curled in distaste. Your saint is currently unaccounted for in the Mid-Hive, Cardinal. And his power, however impressive against orcs, is unproven against the adaptational might of the Tyranids. Then we must find him. Drovan insisted. Broadcast his image on every Voxcaster. Call him to the defense of the faithful. And risk him being overwhelmed before we understand his capabilities? Hellbrant countered. No, we need a controlled engagement. We need to see what he can do against a threat that adapts, that learns. He turned to Magos Thurin. Magos, calculate the primary mycetic spore impact zones. Where will the initial ground assault be heaviest? Theron's mechadendrites blurred over his cogitator console. Calculations indicate Hive Secundus, specifically the industrial sectors. The biomass concentration there is highest. Good, Hellbrand said, a cold plan forming. Evacuate the civilian population from Hive Secundus immediately. Divert all available PDF and Arbeits forces to establish defensive lines around the perimeter. We will turn that hive into a kill box, and the anomaly? Hellbane asked. We will lure him there, Hellbrand replied. He has shown a predilection for responding to threats against civilians. We will make sure he knows where the fight is. As the Imperial war machine groaned into action, panic spread through Veus Magna. The news of the Tyranid arrival could not be contained. The sky darkened, not with clouds, but with the colossal, fleshy shapes of bioships entering high orbit. They blotted out the sun, casting a shadow of doom over the Hive world. Then, the rain began. Not water, but mycetic spores, fleshy pods the size of Hab blocks, screaming down through the atmosphere, burning with re-entry fire. They slammed into the spires and streets of Hive Secundus, cracking open like grotesque eggs to disgorge their living cargo. Gaunts. Hormagaunts and Genestealers poured forth in a chittering tide of chitin and claws. They surged through the manufactorums, slaughtering workers and PDF troopers with mindless ferocity. The air filled with the screams of the dying and the wet tearing of flesh. Larger bioforms followed. Tyranid warriors, towering over the lesser beasts, directed the swarm with synaptic commands. Carnifexes, living battering rams of muscle and bone, smashed through ferrocrete walls, opening the way for the horde. And above it all, a hive tyrant, a winged nightmare of psychic power and martial prowess, descended from the sky, its shadow falling over the doomed hive sector. It shrieked, a sound that ruptured eardrums and shattered morale. Asserting its dominance over the battlefield, Saitama was sitting on a bench in a small park in the mid-hive, sighing as he looked at his empty grocery bag. He'd missed the noodle sale, and now the sky was turning a weird purple color and things were falling from it. Man, he mumbled. Can't a guy just get some cheap dinner in peace? A young woman, ragged and terrified, stumbled into the park, clutching a small child. She saw Saitama, recognized the yellow suit, and ran to him, falling to her knees. Please, she sobbed, holding up her child. Holy One, save us. The sky monsters are here. They're in Hive Secundus, killing everyone. Saitama blinked, looking from the crying woman to the distant hive city, where smoke and fire were already rising. "Sky monsters?" he asked, in Hive Secundus. He stood up, stretching his arms. The boredom that had settled over him was beginning to lift, replaced by a faint glimmer of interest. "Okay," he said. "I'll go check it out." He looked down at the woman. "You should probably find some cover. It might get loud." With that, he crouched slightly and leaped. The ground beneath him cracked, a shockwave shattering the park benches and sending dust billowing outwards. He shot into the air, a yellow blur ascending faster than any Imperial aircraft. He punched through the cloud layer, the sonic boom of his passage shattering windows for kilometers around in the Stratagem. The auger arrays went wild. "Energy spike detected," a sensor officer yelled. "Localized but immense. It's the anomaly. He's airborne." Hellbrant watched the hololith display, a tight smile crossing his face. "He's taken the bait. Track his trajectory. He is heading directly for Hive Secundus, Lord Inquisitor," Magos Thurin reported. "Intercept course with the primary Tyrannid swarm in 30 seconds. Hellbrant leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Now we see," he whispered. "Now we see if the one-punch saint can stand against the great devourer." High above Hive Secundus, Saitama reached the apex of his jump. He looked down at the carnage below, the streets swarming with alien creatures, the fires, the collapsing buildings. He spotted the largest creature, the winged hive tyrant, perched atop the highest spire, directing the slaughter. "Found you," Saitama said to himself. He oriented his body downwards and began his descent. Accelerating with gravity, a human missile aimed squarely at the heart of the Tyrannid swarm. He didn't bother with a dramatic entrance or a battle cry. He just fell, faster and faster, a yellow streak against the darkening sky. He was just a guy who was a hero for fun. And it looked like the fun was about to begin. The descent into Hive Secundus was a plunge into a living nightmare. The air was thick with toxic spores and the agonizing shrieks of the dying. Below, the streets were no longer gray ferrocrete, but a churning carpet of alien chitin, a purple and red tide that consumed everything in its path. Saitama didn't aim for a heroic landing pad. He aimed for the densest concentration of monsters, right at the base of the spire topped by the winged hive tyrant. He hit the ground like an orbital bombardment shell. Crash! The impact generated a shockwave that flattened hab blocks for a city block in every direction. A mushroom cloud of dust, pulverized concrete, and atomized tyrannid biomass rose high into the darkening sky. The roar of the swarm was momentarily silenced by the thunderclap of his arrival in the center of the crater. Steam rising from his yellow suit, Saitama stood up and dusted himself off. He looked around at the devastation, at the countless hormagaunts and termagants that had been reduced to paste by his landing. "Oops," he said, his voice flat amid the carnage. "Came in a little hot." For a microsecond, the Tyrannid swarm paused. The hive mind, the immense galaxy-spanning consciousness directing them, reeled from the sudden, inexplicable loss of biomass in that sector. It focused its myriad eyes on the anomaly in the crater. It analyzed him. Bipedal, mammalian, no armor, negligible psychic presence. Prey, with a collective shriek that defied human hearing. The swarm converged. Thousands of hormagaunts, bounding creatures consisting of little more than razor-sharp talons and teeth, leaped into the crater. They buried Saitama under a writhing mound of alien muscle and chitin, biting, clawing, trying to tear flesh from bone. From the outside, it looked like he had been instantly overwhelmed. Up in the governor's stratagem, Hellbane gasped as the hololith showed the yellow icon disappearing beneath a sea of red angry dots. "He's swarmed!" Hellbane cried. Even a Custodes couldn't survive that many claws. Inquisitor Hellbrant leaned closer to the screen, his eyes intense. "Watch closely, Governor." In the crater, muffled by layers of alien bodies, A bored voice mumbled, "Get off me, you're heavy." There was a sudden eruption. The mound of Tyranids blasted outwards as if a grenade had gone off in their midst. Gaunts were sent flying through the air, their bodies shattered, limbs spinning wildly. Saitama stood there, looking mildly annoyed. There wasn't a scratch on him. A Hormagaunt latched onto his arm, tried to bite through his bicep. Its serrated teeth snapped like dry twigs against his skin. Saitama looked at it, then casually flicked it away with a finger. The creature broke the sound barrier as it flew into a distant bulkhead, exploding on impact. "They're just bugs," Saitama sighed, inspecting his glove for slime. "Just a lot of them." The hive mind, sensing the ineffectiveness of its lesser beasts, shifted tactics instantly. The carpet of smaller creatures parted, making way for the heavy hitters. 3 Carnifexes, towering biological battle tanks armored in chitin thick enough to deflect last cannon fire, thundered into the plaza. Their hooves cracked the foundation of the hive level. Roaring challenges that shook the spires, they charged the lone figure, massive scything talons raised to cleave him in two. "Emperor's mercy," whispered a PDF general back in the Stratageum. 3 Fexes, that's a death sentence for an entire armored company. Saitama watched the lumbering beasts approach. "Oh, bigger bugs. Maybe these will be tougher." The lead Carnifex reached him first, bringing a claw the size of a small car down in a killing arc. Saitama didn't dodge. He just raised his forearm in a lazy block. The massive talon struck his arm and shattered into 1,000 chitinous shards. The Carnifex bellowed in confused pain, stumbling backward. "Hey, watch it," Saitama said. "You almost ripped my cape." He stepped forward and delivered a casual, open-palmed slap to the beast's armored snout. The Carnifex's head snapped back with sickening force, its thick neck breaking instantly. The massive creature flipped backward onto its own carapace, its legs twitching in death throes. The remaining 2 Carnifexes paused, their rudimentary connection. To the hive mind clouded by sudden, instinctual fear. They had never encountered prey that fought back like this. Prey that slapped down apex predators like annoying flies above them on the highest spire. The hive tyrant shrieked in rage. This creature was a direct conduit to the hive mind, a highly intelligent psychic beacon that commanded the local swarm. It recognized the threat Saitama posed. This was no mere biomass. This was an obstacle. The tyrant spread its leathery wings and swooped down from its perch, landing in the plaza with ground-shaking force. It towered over Saitama, a nightmare of bone armor and psychic malice. It wielded massive bone swords that crackled with warp energy, and its eyes glowed with the sickening light of the shadow in the warp dot. It didn't attack physically at first. Instead, it unleashed a psychic scream, a concentrated blast of pure alien horror meant to liquidate the mind of any sentient being. Imperial psychers miles away in the upper hive grabbed their heads and screamed as the backlash hit them, blood pouring from their eyes. Saitama stood in the center of this psychic maelstrom. The ground around him fractured, glass windows shattered. 3 levels up, and lesser Tyranids nearby collapsed, their brains boiled by the proximity to their master's power. Saitama blinked. He rubbed his ear with a pinky finger. "That's really loud," he commented. "Are you done shouting?" The hive tyrant paused, its alien mind reeling. The psychic assault should have reduced this human to a drooling vegetable. Yet his mind was a void. There was nothing there to grasp, no fear to exploit, no psychic presence to crush. It was like trying to psychologically attack a rock. Frustrated, the tyrant resorted to physical violence. It lunged with blinding speed, its monomolecular bones words swinging in a deadly crosscut aimed at Saitama's neck. Saitama caught the blades, one in each hand. He held the thrumming, warp-charged alien swords, looking at them critically. These seemed sharp, dangerous toys. With a grunt of exertion that was mostly theatrical, he squeezed. The alien bone, harder than adamantium and infused with warp energy, cracked. Then it shattered in his grip. The hive tyrant shrieked again, this time in genuine fear. It tried to back away, to regroup, to summon its guards. "You know," Safin said, dusting the bone shards from his gloves as he walked toward the towering monster. "I heard you guys eat whole planets. That sounded pretty tough. I was hoping for a real fight today to take my mind off missing that sale." He stopped right in front of the towering beast, looking up into its multifaceted, glowing eyes. The tyrant looked down, paralyzed by a primal terror it had never known. It was the apex predator of 1,000 galaxies, but in the reflection of this bald man's dead eyes, it saw only its own extinction. "But you're just like the rest," Saitama sighed, pulling his fist back. "Disappointing." He threw the punch. Normal punch. It connected squarely with the hive tyrant's armored chest cavity. The result was catastrophic. The tyrant didn't just die, it was erased. Its torso vanished in a spray of ichor and atomized bone. The shockwave of the blow continued onward, punching a hole through the spire behind the tyrant, a neat circular tunnel blasting out the other side of the hive structure and into the toxic clouds beyond. The upper half of the tyrant head, shoulders, and wings spun wildly into the air before crashing down into the street below. A psychic shockwave ripped through the hive mind's local network. Every tyrannid organism in Hive Secundus froze, their connection to the guiding intelligence severed instantly by the violent death of their synapse leader. The roar of the swarm died, replaced by confused chittering. The coordinated army dissolved into a mob of mindless beasts, lacking direction or purpose. In the center of the silent plaza, Saitama stood alone, surrounded by the steaming remains of the tyrannid vanguard. He looked at his glove, now thoroughly coated in purple alien gore. "Oh man," he groaned, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "This is never gonna wash out. Genos is gonna be so annoying about the laundry." High above, in the governor's stratageum, absolute silence reigned. Inquisitor Hellbrand stared at the hololith, his face a rigid mask, though a vein throbbed visibly in his temple. Magos Theron's mechadendrites had stopped moving, his logic cores frozen in a loop of processing impossible data. Governor Hellbane was the first to speak, his voice a strangled whisper that seemed too loud in the quiet room. "By the Golden Throne," he breathed. "What is he?" Hellbrand slowly unclenched his fists. His eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with a terrifying realization. "He is exactly what I feared, Governor," the Inquisitor said softly. "He is the end of all things, and he is bored." The silence in the central plaza of Hive Secundus was heavier than the roar of battle that had preceded it. It was a wet, settling silence, broken only by the dripping of alien ichor from shattered architecture and the confused, mindless chittering of leaderless tyrannid bioforms. Saitama stood in the epicenter of the devastation, shaking his hand vigorously. "Gross," he complained to the empty air. "It's under my fingernails. This is way worse than kombu stains." Around him, the remnant of the tyrannid vanguard, thousands of hormigants and termagants, whose synaptic leash had just been violently severed, stood frozen. Bereft of the hive mind's guiding intelligence, they reverted to base instinct. Some rooted aimlessly in the gore. Others turned on each other in sudden confused spasms of violence. Most just stood there, quivering, their alien brains unable to process the sudden absence of the colossal will that had driven them. Saitama looked around at the sea of chitinous bodies blocking his path out of the plaza. "You guys are in the way," he stated. Didn't want to get any dirtier, so he opted for efficiency. He raised his right foot and brought it down in a sharp, decisive stomp. Thoom. A seismic wave rippled outwards through the ferrocrete pavement. It wasn't a planet-cracking strike, just enough to clear the road. The vibration pulverized the mindless tyrannids within a 100-meter radius. turning them into a fine purple mist that settled over the already grime-coated ruins. "Better," Saitama muttered, stepping over a flattened Carnifex head. He needed to find a working elevator or stairs. Jumping back up would just make another hole in the ceiling. And he felt he'd caused enough property damage for one day. High above in the governor's stratagem, the paralysis of awe was slowly giving way to the frantic energy of crisis management. "Synaptic backlash confirmed," Magos Thurin reported, his voice regaining its monotone cadence as his logic cores processed the new reality. "The Tyranid ground forces in Hive Secundus have lost cohesion. They are reverting to feral behavior. The immediate threat to the Spire integrity has decreased by 84%. Governor Hellbane slumped into his command throne, letting out a breath he felt he'd been holding for an hour. He did it. By the throne, the anomaly actually did it. "We're saved. We are breathing, Governor." "That is not the same as being saved," Inquisitor Hellbrand cut in, his voice sharp enough to slice glass. He strode away from the hololith, his mind already racing several moves ahead. "The ground force is broken, yes. But look above you." Hellbrand gestured angrily at the ceiling, indicating the void beyond. "The bioships remain in orbit. They are reeling from the psychic feedback of the tyrant's death, but they are vast, mindless organisms. They will recover. And they still possess enough biomass to drown this world in spores, hive mind or no." Hellbane paled again. "Then, what do we do? The defense platforms are still overwhelmed." Hellbrand stopped pacing. His eyes, usually cold flint, burned with a terrifying intensity. "We do not do anything, Governor. We wield the weapon the Emperor has dropped into our laps." He tapped his Vox bead, opening a channel to the planet's highest military authority. "Lord Marshal, this is Inquisitor Hellbrand. The situation in Hive Secundus has stabilized. Mobilize your elite cleanup crews. Tempestus Scions and your best PDF veterans. Move into the impact zone. Secure the area. Secure the area against what, Lord Inquisitor?" The Marshal's voice crackled back, confused. "The Tyranids?" "No, Marshal," Hellbrand replied grimly. "Secure it against the witnesses. No unauthorized picked captures. No civilians. If the anomaly is still there, contain the site until I arrive. I am taking the Valkyrie down." Hellbrand out, he turned to the Magos. "Thurin, keep tracking those orbital vessels. If they show signs of preparing another major spore drop, I want to know yesterday. And what of the Sate?" Hellbane asked, his voice filled with a mixture of fear and reverence. Hellbrand paused at the blast doors of the stratagem, checking the power cell in his bolt pistol. "He is not a saint, Governor," the Inquisitor said, his voice low. "Saints are martyrs who die for the Imperium. This man, this being, does not know how to die. That makes him something far more dangerous." The descent into Hive Secundus was a journey into hell. The Valkyrie assault carrier bucked against atmospheric turbulence caused by the heat of burning districts. Through the thick armored viewports, Hellbrand watched the devastation below. Entire HAB sectors had been reduced to rubble by the Tyranid advance, now choked with the corpses of the invaders. They sat down on a precarious outcropping overlooking the central plaza. Hellbrand emerged, flanked by a squad of inquisitorial stormtroopers, their Helgans humming with power. The plaza itself was a charnel house that defied description. It wasn't just a battlefield. It was an abattoir where the butchers had been butchered. The sheer volume of Tyranid biomass spread across the Ferrocrete was staggering. And in the center of it all, illuminated by the flickering light of burning promethium lines, stood the anomaly. Saitama was trying to wipe something off his white cape with a piece of debris. Looking thoroughly miserable, Hellbrand signaled his troopers to hold position. He walked forward alone, his boots squelching in the alien muck. He stopped 10 meters from the bald man, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "Sama," Helbrand said, his voice amplified by his suit's voxcaster. Saitama looked up. His expression wasn't one of triumph or battle fury. It was mild annoyance. "Oh, it's you," Saitama said. "The gloomy guy from the space station. Look at this mess. Do you know how hard it is to get purple out of white fabric?" Helbrand stared at him. A hive tyrant, a creature that had slain worlds, was vaporized seconds ago in this very spot. And its slayer was complaining about laundry. "You destroyed the synapse creature," Helbrand stated, trying to keep the incredulity out of his voice. "You broke the back of the invasion force. That big shrieking bug?" Saitama shrugged. "Yeah, it was annoying. It kept yelling in my head. And it broke the street. You guys really need better infrastructure." He tossed the piece of debris away. "Anyway, I think I'm done here. The rest of these bugs are just standing around. Your soldiers can handle them, right? I need to find a shower and maybe some dinner if anything is still open." Helbrand felt a vain throb in his temple. The casual dismissal of a planetary-level threat was maddening. This creature operated on a scale of reality completely divorced from the grim struggle of the 41st millennium. "The threat is not ended," Helbrand pressed, pointing upwards toward the smoke-choked sky. "The ground forces are broken, yes, but the great bioships remain in orbit. They are still full of these creatures. If they are not destroyed, they will continue to rain death upon this world until nothing is left but bedrock." Saitama looked up, squinting through the haze. "More of them up there." "Seriously?" "Millions more," Helbrand confirmed, sensing an opening. "They are currently disorganized, reeling from the blow you struck. But they will recover. And when they do, they will finish what they started. They will interrupt dinner for every soul on this planet. Permanently." Saitama sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of infinite weariness with repetitive tasks. "Man, they just don't know when to quit, do they?" He rolled his shoulders, a cracking sound echoing loudly in the quiet plaza. "Fine, I guess I have to go up there and deal with the source. Otherwise, they'll just keep dropping junk on my head." He looked at Helbrand. "Hey, if I take care of the big ships, can you make sure someone saves me some of those noodles I missed out on? The spicy beef flavor?" Helbrand blinked. It was an absurd request in the face of apocalypse. "If you destroy the Hive fleet," the Inquisitor replied with deadly seriousness, "I will personally ensure you have a lifetime supply of whatever noodles you desire. By the Golden Throne, I swear it." "Deal," Saitama said. He didn't tense up. He didn't crouch. He just looked at the sky. "Be right back." He pushed off the ground. This time, he didn't hold back to save the pavement. The launch was a cataclysm. The entire central plaza of Hive Secundus, already weakened by the battle, simply ceased to exist. A shockwave of unimaginable force blasted outwards, knocking Helbrand and his armored stormtroopers off their feet 50 meters away. The surrounding ruined buildings crumbled into dust. A pillar of displaced air punched straight up through the atmosphere, blowing a hole through the toxic clouds and creating a momentary, clear view of the star-strewn void above. Helbrand picked himself up from the rubble, coughing, his ears ringing. He looked up at the rapidly vanishing yellow speck ascending towards the heavens faster than a macro cannon shell. "Emperor, have mercy on those poor, mindless beasts," the Inquisitor whispered, dusting the tyranid ash from his coat. "They have no idea what is coming for them." The transition from the toxic, screaming atmosphere of Veus Magna to the silent vacuum of high orbit was instantaneous. Saitama punched through the planet's exosphere, like a bullet through tissue paper. The friction of his ascent had turned the air around him into superheated plasma, creating a fiery comet tail that was visible across half the hemisphere. As he breached the vacuum, the fire died, replaced by the absolute. Biting cold of the void, he floated there for a moment. suspended between the swirling green and brown marble of the planet below and the endless sea of stars above. His white cape, no longer subject to atmospheric drag, hung limply behind him. "Chilly," Saitama remarked. His voice didn't travel in the vacuum, but the vibrations resonated through his own skull. He wiggled his toes in his red boots. "Hope I don't catch a cold before I get those noodles." He turned his attention to the reason he was up here. The Tyranid biofleet hung in the void like a grotesque chandelier, made of meat and bone. There were thousands of them. The smaller escort drones were the size of Imperial frigates, clustering around cruisers that bristled with weapon symbionts. But it was the hive ships that dominated the view. They were leviathans of living tissue, miles long, their ribbed hulls pulsing with obscene vitality. They were creatures grown in the cold dark between galaxies. Evolution perfected for the sole purpose of consumption. The hive mind, still reeling from the psychic backlash of the tyrant's death on the surface, suddenly became aware of the new presence in its midst. Its countless consciousnesses focused on the tiny, insignificant speck of biomass floating in their territory. It was confused. It sensed no technology, no psychic shielding, no life support. Just a small, unprotected mammalian biped. Yet, its threat assessment instincts, honed over eons of devouring star systems, were screaming a warning it couldn't understand. It decided to err on the side of caution, which for the Tyranids meant overwhelming, indiscriminate annihilation. As one, the fleet turned its guns toward Saitama. Bioplasma batteries mounted on the flanks of the great ships charged with sickening green energy. Pyro-acid spitters flexed their sphincters. Massive biocannons loaded with hypervelocity osseous ammunition took aim. "Oh, they see me," Saitama noted as the dark shape shifted against the starfield. The void lit up. A barrage was unleashed that could have slagged an entire Imperial battle fleet. Torrents of superheated plasma, globs of acid capable of eating through void shields in seconds, and solid bone projectiles the size of hab blocks converged on the lone figure. It was a silent, kaleidoscopic storm of death. Saitama didn't bother dodging. It seemed like too much effort to move out of the way of so many things. He just put his arms up in a half-hearted block and flew straight through it. The bombardment struck him with world-ending force. Explosions blossomed silently in the vacuum, creating a miniature nebula of glowing gas and debris around him. Plasma washed over his suit. Acid splashed against his cape. Giant bone shards shattered against his chest. He emerged from the other side of the barrage, dusting off his shoulders. His suit was singed in places, and his cape had a few new acid burns, but he was otherwise unharmed. "Annoying," he grumbled, wiping a glob of rapidly freezing bioplasma from his glove. "This is going to require dry cleaning." He looked at the largest ship in the center of the formation, a bloated, tentacled monstrosity that served as a Norn Queen's vessel, a primary synapse node for the fleet. "Okay, big ugly one first," he decided. He oriented himself toward the Leviathan. He didn't need propulsion. He simply willed himself to move, and physics obediently stepped aside. He accelerated from a standstill to a significant fraction of light speed in an instant. The hive mind felt a flicker of something it hadn't experienced since its birth in the intergalactic void. True terror. The prey was not dying. The prey was coming. Saitama became a golden streak cutting through the darkness. He bypassed the escort ships, the defensive spore fields, the desperate point defense fire. He closed the distance to the 5-mile-long hive ship in a heartbeat. He drew his right fist back. Given the size of the target, he decided a little extra effort was warranted. "Serious." "Series," he intoned silently in the void. He thrust his fist forward, serious punch. His fist connected with the thickest armor plating on the hive ship's prow. There was no sound in space, but if there had been, it would have been the sound of a galaxy cracking. the impact didn't just break the ship. It transferred an amount of kinetic energy that defied calculation into the creature's mass. The entire 5-mile length of the bioship rippled instantaneously as the force propagated through its structure, that it didn't explode into chunks. It was a TOMIZED, that the massive organism vanished in a blinding flash of released energy, transformed instantly into a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated vapor and subatomic particles. But the punch didn't stop there. The shockwave of pure force continued onward through the vacuum, a guided beam of annihilation. It cored through the Tyranid fleet behind the primary target. Cruisers, escorts, and thousands of drone ships caught in the path of the blow were simply erased from existence, turning into streaks of light before vanishing into the dark. A hole had been punched through the center of the fleet, clearing a path straight out into deep space. On the orbital defense stations below, Imperial Navy augursams stared at their screens as entire squadrons of enemy contacts simply blinked out of existence. The energy readings spiked so high the cogitators melted down, unable to process the data. The hive mind screamed. It was a psychic death knell that echoed through the warp across the entire sector. A significant portion of its consciousness had just been violently amputated. The remaining ships fell into chaos. The primal directive to consume was overridden by an even more primal directive: survive. The fleet began to scatter. Great bioships turned clumsily, firing their engines, desperate to put distance between themselves and the Golden Destroyer. Saitama floated in the center of the expanding debris field of frozen ichor and meat. He watched the remaining ships turning tail. "Hey, where are you going?" he complained. "If you leave now, that Inquisitor guy might not give me my noodles." He couldn't let them escape. It would be a hassle if they came back later. "Guess I have to clean up," he sighed. He blurred into motion again. He didn't use serious punches this time. They weren't worth the energy. He just flew from ship to ship, a pinball of destruction. He landed on the hull of a cruiser and stomped, cracking it in half. He flew through the center of a massive Kraken-class vessel, bursting out the other side covered in blue gore. He slapped defensive drones out of the sky, grabbed tentacled escorts by their appendages, and swung them into other ships. It was a massacre. The void above Veus Magna turned into a graveyard of alien biology. In less than 5 minutes, what had been a splinter fleet capable of devouring a solar system was reduced to drifting wreckage. Saitama stopped, hovering amidst the carnage. He looked around. No more moving blips. Just cold meat drifting in the silence. "Okay," he said, satisfied. "That should do it." He looked down at the planet below, a swirling blue marble. He could see the scar of Hive Tertius where he'd punched the war boss, and the smoking ruin of Hive Secundus's central plaza. Spicy beef noodles, he reminded himself. He reoriented his body feet first toward the planet and let gravity take hold, adding a little push of his own to speed things up. He descended back toward the atmosphere, a returning hero clad in a slightly worse for wear yellow suit, ready to collect his reward. The re-entry was less dramatic than the ascent. Saitama merely allowed gravity to pull him back towards Veus Magna, using his body like a stubborn brick to slow his descent through the thickening atmosphere. He didn't bother with a landing strategy. He just aimed for the general vicinity of the governor's palace, figuring that was where the guy who promised him food would be. He punched through the cloud layer, directly above the Hive spire, creating a sonic boom that rattled the stained glass windows of the Ecclesiarchy Cathedral, 3 levels down. Below him, the highest landing pad of the palace was a hive of activity. Valkyries and Arvis lighters were landing and taking off, ferrying troops and supplies. A reception committee of high-ranking officials, including a very anxious Governor Hellbane and a stoic Inquisitor Hellbrant, was assembled, staring nervously at the sky. They had seen the augur readings. They knew the Tyranid fleet was gone, erased from the void in a matter of minutes. They had seen the impossible energy spikes. They knew he was coming back. A yellow dot appeared in the sky, growing rapidly larger. "Prepare yourselves," Hellbrent instructed the surrounding Tempesticians, his voice tight. "Do not raise your weapons unless I command it. Do not make eye contact. Do not breathe too loudly." Sama landed. He didn't crash this time. He landed with a gentle thud, his boots touching down on the ferrocrete landing pad with the grace of a falling feather. Despite having just dropped from orbit, he stood up straight, rolling his shoulders. His suit was scorched from re-entry and splattered with frozen Tyranid ichor from the void battle. His cape was tattered and burned in several places. He looked like he'd been dragged backward through a promethium refinery, but he was unhurt. A dead silence fell over the landing pad. Every eye was fixed on the man who had just single-handedly fought a void war and won before lunchtime. Saitama looked around, blinking against the harsh light of the landing pad lumens. His gaze landed on Hellbrent. "Hey," Saitama said, walking towards the Inquisitor. "I'm back. The big ships are gone. I think I got them all." Hellbrent, a man who had faced Daemon Princes and Xenos horrors without flinching, felt a dry lump in his throat. He managed a curt nod. "The augurs confirm it," the Inquisitor stated, his voice steadier than he felt. "The Tyranid biofleet has ceased to exist as a cohesive force. Veus Magna is saved." Beside him, Governor Hellbane looked like he might faint. He dropped to one knee, his golden robes puddling around him. "Praise be," he gasped, his voice cracking. "A miracle. A true miracle of the God Emperor." Sayana looked down at the kneeling governor, then back to Hellbrent. "Yeah, great," Saitama said. "So, about those noodles? You said spicy beef flavor, right? And a lifetime supply?" Hellbane's head snapped up, confusion warring with reverence on his face. "Noodles? My Lord Saint, you have saved a world. You can have anything. Gold, jewels, a harem of pleasure servitors, a planet of your own to rule." Safama waved a hand dismissively. "Nah, too much hassle. Just the noodles. I'm starving. Flying in space makes you hungry." Hellbrent stepped forward, intervening before the governor could embarrass himself further. "The arrangement will be honored," the Inquisitor said formally. He turned to a gobsmacked aide. "You there. Contact the logistical quartermaster. Requisition every crate of spicy beef flavor ration noodles available in the hive. Have them delivered to the anomalous individual's quarters immediately." The aide stared, mouth agape. "Every crate, my lord? But that would be thousands ... Did I stutter? Hellbrent's voice was a whip crack. "Do it, now." The aide scrambled away, looking terrified. Hellbrent turned back to Saitama. "Your ... reward is being prepared. In the meantime, we must discuss the implications of what has occurred today." Saitama rubbed his stomach. "Can we discuss it while we eat? Seriously, I haven't eaten since breakfast." Hellbrent closed his eyes for a second, summoning patience from reserves he didn't know he had. "Very well. Governor Hellbane has prepared a victory feast in the Great Hall. It will be more substantial than ration noodles. You may join us there." Saitama's eyes lit up slightly. "A feast? Like with real meat and stuff? Not just the processed goop?" "The finest grok steaks and a masek on the planet," Hellbane interjected, eager to please. "Okay," Saitama said, heading toward the palace doors. "That sounds better. Let's go." As Saitama walked past, the Tempesticians, elite warriors trained from birth to feel no fear, instinctively took a half-step back. Clearing a wide path for him, Hellbrent watched him go. The most dangerous being in the galaxy, excited about grok steak. He turned to Hellbane, who was struggling back to his feet. "Governor," Hellbrent said quietly. Secure all Vox records of the orbital engagement. Classify them magenta level clearance. If anyone outside this landing pad speaks of what they saw today, they are to be silenced. Permanently. But why, Lord Inquisitor? Hellbane whispered. It was a glorious victory. The people should know. The people should know the Emperor protects, Hellbrent replied grimly. They should not know that a single unaugmented human just performed a feat that would make a Primarch blush. It would shatter the very foundations of our faith. It would make them question everything. He looked toward the palace doors where Saitama had disappeared. We must control the narrative, Governor. We must contain the truth. Because if the wider Imperium learns what this man can do, the Tyranids will seem like a minor nuisance compared to the chaos that will follow. Hellbrent adjusted his coat, his face setting into a mask of icy resolve. Come, let us go feast with the anomaly, and pray the Emperor grants us the wisdom to survive him. The great hall of the governor's palace was a cavernous expanse of polished marble, gilded statues of long-dead heroes, and towering stained glass windows depicting the Emperor in myriad forms of martial glory. It was designed to awe lesser men into submission. Currently, it was serving as an all-you-can-eat buffet for a man in a dirty yellow suit. Saitama sat at the head table, normally reserved for the governor and high-ranking ecclesiarchy officials. He was surrounded by silver platters piled high, with roasted grox haunches, avian delicacies from off-world, and bowls of steaming, spiced root vegetables. He was eating with a speed and efficiency that rivaled his combat prowess. This is pretty good, Saitama mumbled around a mouthful of grox steak, pointing with a fork. A bit chewy, though. You should try marinating it longer. Governor Hellbane, seated to Sana's right, nodded furiously, pulling out a data slate and stylus with trembling hands. Marinating. Longer. Yes, of course, my lord. A divine revelation on culinary preparation. The palace chefs shall be servitorized for their failure to anticipate your desires. Saitama stopped chewing. No, don't do that. Just maybe tell them for next time. It's not that big a deal. Mercy. Hellbane scribbled frantically. The saint shows unprecedented mercy to the incompetent. A lesson in humility for us all. Inquisitor Hellbrent sat on Sathoma's left, his food untouched. He sipped a goblet of water and watched the spectacle with grim detachment. The nobility of Veus Magna filled the rest of the hall, speaking in hushed tones, terrified to look directly at the being who had slapped a biofleet out of existence. Hellbrent was not watching Saitama eat. He was watching the room. He saw the fear, yes, but beneath it, he saw something far more dangerous. Awe. The seeds of heresy were watering themselves with a Masek and fine dining. His vox bead crackled in his ear. It was Magos Thurin, speaking on an encrypted channel. Lord Inquisitor, the tech priest synthesized voice grated. We have completed preliminary scans of the orbital debris field. Report, Hellbrent murmured, keeping his eyes on Saitama, who was now stacking 3 steaks onto a single slice of bread. It is vanishing, Lord Inquisitor. The Tyranid biomass. It is rapidly decaying on a molecular level. The energy residue from the anomaly strikes seems to be destabilizing the very matter of the Xenos creatures. Within another solar day, there will be almost no physical evidence that a hive fleet was ever here. Hellbrent felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty hall. He doesn't just destroy, he thought. He erases. Keep monitoring Magos. And lock down those sensor logs. No one outside your inner circle sees that data. Compliance. There is one more thing, Lord Inquisitor. The psychic shockwave of the fleet's destruction. It was significant. The astropathic choir is reporting severe disturbances in the warp. Explain. They are screaming about a great ringing bell in the immaterium. A beacon of pure violence that has illuminated this sector to things that dwell in the deep warp. Hellbrent cut the connection. He looked at Saitama, who was currently trying to balance a spoon on his nose while waiting for dessert. You cleaned up the mess, Hellbrand thought bitterly, but you rang the dinner bell for everything else in the galaxy. The feast was interrupted by the slamming open of the great obsidian doors at the far end of the hall. The music died instantly. The nobles gasped. A figure stumbled in, flanked by palace guards who looked ready to bolt. It was Master Astropath Xanthus, the head of the planet's psychic communications. Xanthus was a pitiful sight. His robes were torn, his frail body shaking uncontrollably. Blood streamed from his empty eye sockets, painting crimson streaks down his pale cheeks. "Governor, Inquisitor!" Xanthus shrieked, his voice thin and reedy, laced with residual warp static. "Doom! Doom comes following the Golden Wake." Hellbane stood up, knocking over his goblet. "Xanthus, what is the meaning of this interruption? We are entertaining the saint." The blind astropath pointed a trembling blood-stained finger not at the governor, but directly at Saitama. "Him! It is him! The great slaughter in the void!" It echoed in the realm of brass and blood. Hellbrand was on his feet instantly, his hand on his power sword. He knew exactly which realm the Psyker meant. Xanthus fell to his knees, clutching his head. The Skull Lord, he felt the tithe, millions of souls snuffed out in an instant of perfect violence. He is pleased. He sends his regards. The temperature in the Great Hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. The shadows between the columns deepened, twisting into shapes that hurt the eye to look at. Saitama swallowed his last bite of steak and looked over at the screaming man. "Who's the Skull Lord? Is he a bad guy?" Before anyone could answer, the reality of the situation made itself known. The air above the high tables shimmered, tearing open with the sound of screaming metal. The sickening scent of ozone, brimstone, and old dried blood flooded the hall, overpowering the smell of the feast. A warp rift, small but stable, ripped open right in the middle of the banquet hall. Through the tear, a figure stepped out, solidifying into reality with a thunderous crash of armored boots on marble. He was enormous, towering over even the tallest guardsmen. He was clad in ancient Baroque power armor, the color of dried arterial. Blood, trimmed with brass fittings that seemed to writhe like living serpents. Trophy skulls of humans, xenos, and things unrecognizable hung from chains at his waist, rattling like a macabre wind chime. He wore no helmet. His face was a ruin of scarred flesh, his eyes burning with an inner, hateful yellow light. His teeth were filed to points, and his breath was a cloud of sulfur. He carried a massive chain axe in one hand, its teeth churning hungrily even though it wasn't activated. In the other, a bolt pistol oversized even for an Astartes. The intruder looked around the hall, his gaze sweeping over the terrified nobility with utter contempt. He sniffed the air, savoring their fear. Then, his burning eyes locked onto Saitama. A grin spread across the Chaos Marine's scarred face, a horrific rictus of joy and hate. "Found you," the intruder growled, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. "The one who made the void bleed." He raised his chain axe in salute to the bald man. "I am Korgor the Blood Quencher, champion of the World Eaters, chosen of Khorne." He bellowed, his voice shaking the stained glass windows. "My master felt your work in the void, a slaughter so pure, so complete. He demands your skull for his throne." The nobles screamed and scattered, overturning tables in their haste to flee. Governor Hellbane fainted dead away. Inquisitor Hellbrand drew his power sword, his face grim. Saitama just remained seated, holding his empty fork. He looked at the massive, blood-soaked warrior interrupting his dinner. "Man," Saitama sighed, placing the fork down with a clatter. "Can't I just eat in peace? I was waiting for the pudding." Pandemonium erupted in the Great Hall. The nobility of Veus Magna, who had spent the last hour gingerly sipping a Masek and pretending not to be terrified of the bald man, now stampeded for the exits in a tidal wave of expensive silk and panicked screams. Only Inquisitor Hellbrand stood fast. He stepped over the unconscious body of Governor Hellbane, placing himself between the Chaos Champion and Safanma. He activated the power field on his sword, the weapon humming with lethal energy. "By the authority of the Holy Ordos," Hellbrand declared. His voice rock steady despite the overwhelming aura of dread radiating from the intruder. "I banish you back to the warp, traitor." Korgor, the blood quencher, barely glanced at the Inquisitor. He swung his massive bolt pistol in a lazy backhand arc. The heavy weapon connected with Hellbrand's chest carapace. There was a sickening crunch of ceramite and bone. Hellbrand was launched backward like a ragdoll, flying 20 meters through the air before crashing into a stone pillar and crumpling to the floor. Motionless, Saitama watched this with a mild frown. "Hey, that wasn't very nice." He was just doing his job. Korgor ignored him. He stalked toward the head table, his chain axe revving up to a shrieking whine, its adamantium teeth blurring into a haze of destruction. The scent of ancient blood and ozone coming off him was choking. He leaped onto the table, scattering plates and goblets. He towered over the seated Saitama, raising the roaring chain axe high for a decapitating strike. Blood for the blood god. Korgor roared, his voice a torrent of hate. Skulls for the skull throne. He brought the axe down with enough force to cleave a tank turret in half. Saitama didn't want the table to break. He was still hoping they would bring the dessert out. He raised his left hand and caught the descending chain axe by the flat of the blade. Stopping it dead inches from his nose, the weapon shrieked in protest, its motor grinding aggressively as the teeth tried to chew through Saitama's yellow glove. Sparks flew, but the glove didn't even tear. The great hall fell silent again, save for the whimpering of a few trapped nobles and the grinding of the frustrated axe. Korgor stared. His hate-filled yellow eyes widened in incomprehension. He strained with all his transhuman might, his corrupted muscles bulging, the servos in his power armor whining. The axe wouldn't budge. It was like trying to cut through a neutron star. "You're really noisy," Saitama said, looking up at the towering monstrosity of ceramite and mutated flesh. "And you're messing up the tablecloth." "What? What trickery is this?" Korgor snarled, spittle flying from his fanged mouth. "No mortal flesh resists the bite of Khorne's chosen." "I don't know who Khorne is," Saitama replied. "But you need to calm down. You're ruining dinner." Saitama stood up. He didn't wrench the axe away. He just lightly chopped Korgor on the wrist with the side of his free hand. It was a casual gesture, like someone chopping a vegetable. Crack. The sound was wet and loud. Korgor's wrist, protected by inches of ancient, warp-forged ceramite and bone, snapped at a 90-degree angle. The chain axe fell from his nerveless fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. The Chaos Champion roared, not in anger this time, but in shocking pain. He stumbled back off the table, clutching his ruined limb. "Impossible!" Korgor bellowed, his worldview fracturing. "My strength is absolute. A gift from the Lord of Skulls himself." "Your strength is okay," Saitama said, dusting off his glove. "But you rely on it too much. You leave yourself wide open." Korgor, maddened by pain and humiliation, drew a wicked serrated combat knife with his good hand. He lunged at Saitama, a desperate, frothing berserker aiming for the eyes. Saitama sighed. Consecutive ... slaps. His hands blurred. He didn't punch. He slapped. A flurry of open-palmed strikes moved so fast they appeared as a solid wall of hands. They connected with Korgor's armored face. Chest and shoulders. Slaps. Lap, slap, slap, slap. The sound was like a machine gun firing spades into wet clay. The ancient power armor, which had weathered the firepower of entire guard regiments, dented, cracked, and then simply disintegrated under the barrage of casual violence. Korgor didn't have time to scream. His physical form was pulverized inside his armor before being blasted backward. What remained of the champion of Korna, twisted wreckage of metal and meat, flew the entire length of the Great Hall, crashing through the massive oak doors at the far end and tumbling out into the palace courtyard. The warp, rift in the center of the hall, shuddered. Without its anchor in reality, it collapsed in upon itself with a mournful howl, vanishing in a puff of acrid smoke. Silas returned to the banquet hall. Saitama stood by the table, adjusting his cape. He looked at the mess on the floor, then at the unconscious Inquisitor, then at the terrified kitchen staff peeking out from behind a service door. "Sorry about the mess," Saitama called out to them. "Hey, is the pudding still coming? I think I have room now." Across the room, Inquisitor Hellbrand groaned and pushed himself up from the floor. His chest carapace was cracked, his ribs broken, his lungs burning. He spat a glob of blood onto the marble. He looked at the shattered doors where the Chaos Champion had exited at terminal velocity. He looked at Saitama, who was calmly sitting back down and refolding his napkin. A cold dread, deeper than any he had felt facing Xenos or heretics, settled into Hellbrand's soul. The Tyranids were mindless hunger. They could be understood, even if only as a force of nature, but this, Korgor, was a chosen warrior of Khorne, a being infused with the power of a dark god, and Saitama had dismissed him like an unruly child. The implications were apocalyptic. The Chaos Gods had noticed Saitama. They had sent a champion to test him, and that champion had been swatting aside like an insect. The ruinous powers did not take humiliation lightly. Khorne would rage. Tzeentch would plot. Nurgle would fester. Slaanesh would obsess. The great game had just changed forever, and Veus Magna was ground zero. Hellbrand staggered to his feet, clutching his broken chest. He limped toward the head table, ignoring the pain. He had to get to the Voxcaster on the governor's dais. He needed to make a call. A call he had prayed he would never have to make. He needed to call the Titan. The dinner party was officially over. The servants didn't bring the pudding. Instead, squads of palace guards and Medicae personnel swarmed the Great Hall, tending to the fainted nobles and carting away the governor. A team of tech priests arrived to sanctify the area where the warp rift had opened, swinging censers and chanting binary prayers to cleanse the lingering taint. Saitama sat alone at the head table for a while, watching the cleanup with a disappointed expression. Finally, realizing no dessert was forthcoming, he stood up, stretched, and wandered out of the hall, stepping over the broken doors and the remains of Korgor the Blood Quencher on his way back to his assigned guest quarters. He found his room, lavish suite bigger than his entire apartment back in Z-City, stacked floor to ceiling with crates marked ration noodle, spicy beef flavor, grade F meat substitute. His eyes lit up. Jackpot. He spent the rest of the evening happily boiling water in the opulent marble bathroom and eating noodles while watching the local Vox casts on a data slate. It was mostly boring propaganda about industrial quotas and sermons on obedience, interspersed with frantic, censored reports about the miracle of Hive Secundus. He fell asleep amidst a pile of empty noodle cups, content for the first time since arriving in this strange universe, while Saitama slept the sleep of the truly unbothered. Inquisitor Hellbrand was wide awake in the stratagem, refusing pain meds for his broken ribs so he could think clearly. The room was sealed, the Vox channels encrypted with the highest level ciphers available. He was speaking to a ghost. On the main hololith, a grainy, flickering image of a hooded figure was projected. The transmission was coming from deep across the sector, from a vessel that officially did not exist. "Lord Inquisitor," the figure intoned, its voice distorted to anonymity. "We received your signal. The Titan Protocol is an extreme measure. Justify it." Hellbrand leaned over the console, each breath a stab of pain. "The justification is currently sleeping off a noodle binge in the guest wing of the governor's palace." He transmitted a data packet. the security footage of the Tyranid tyrant's death, the orbital sensor logs of the hive ship's annihilation, and most crucially, the pic capture from the Great Hall just hours ago. Saitama catching a cornate chain axe with his bare hand and slapping a Chaos Champion into oblivion. There was a long silence on the other end of the line as the data was processed. By the throne, the hooded figure whispered, its composure cracking. These readings, they are impossible. No biological entity should possess this kinetic potential. He is here, Hellbrent grated out. And now the archenemy knows it. Korgor was a probe, a test. The Chaos Gods have turned their eyes toward Veus Magna. We have maybe days before they send something that won't just knock on the door. What is your assessment of the anomaly's allegiance? None, Hellbrent said instantly. He has no loyalty to the Imperium. He views our greatest threats as minor annoyances. He is a force of nature, a hurricane in human shape. Currently, the hurricane is blowing in our favor. But if the ruinous powers find a way to turn him, or if he simply gets bored and decides to leave, he let the threat hang in the air. Understood, the figure replied, its voice hardening into steel. The Titan Protocol is active. The Phalanx of Terra is diverting from its patrol route. We will arrive in system within 3 solar days. Hellbrent felt a wave of relief mixed with deeper dread. The Phalanx, a fortress monastery of the Imperial Fists, and aboard it, a demi-company of Astartes, the Angels of Death, and Lord Inquisitor, the figure added. We are bringing a librarian. If this anomaly has any connection to the warp, we will rip the truth from his mind. The connection terminated. Hellbrent stared at the blank screen. He had just invited the most lethal warriors of humanity to his planet to confront a man who treated physics like a suggestion. Emperor, protect us, he whispered into the silence of the Stratagem. I hope I haven't just signed the death warrant for this entire sector. The next morning, Saitama woke up feeling refreshed. He did his morning routine 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10 kilometers run around the sprawling palace grounds, much to the terror of the palace guards, who scattered like frightened groks whenever he jogged past. He returned to his room, ate 3 cups of noodles for breakfast, and decided to go for a walk in the city. He needed to find a tailor. His cape was getting ragged, and he wanted to see if he could find a replacement for his red gloves, which were starting to smell like Tyranid guts. He wandered out of the palace gates, ignoring the salutes of the guards, and descended into the upper hive levels. The city was transformed. The despair that had hung over Veus Magna for years was gone, replaced by a manic energy. The streets were crowded with people, many wearing crude yellow armbands or homemade white capes. Saitama walked through the crowds, largely unnoticed at first. He was just a bald guy in a tracksuit. But then, someone recognized him. It's him, a voice shouted. The Saint. The cry spread like wildfire. Within seconds, he was surrounded. People were cheering, weeping, trying to touch his clothes. Babies were thrust towards him for blessings. Whoa, hey, watch it, Saitama said, gently pushing through the press of bodies. Personal space, guys. He found a small tailor shop tucked away in a side street. The owner, a wrinkled old man named Hemlock, nearly had a heart attack when the savior of the planet walked in and asked if he could patch a cape. My lord. Hemlock stammered, bowing so low his nose touched the floor. It would be an honor. A sacred duty. I will use my finest synth weave. I will embroider it with gold thread. Nah, just regular white is fine, Saitama said, handing over the tattered cape. And do you have any red rubber gloves? Like for washing dishes? As Hemlock worked with trembling hands, Saitama stood by the shop window, watching the crowd outside grow larger. They were chanting now, singing hymns that had been hastily rewritten to include his name. He sighed. It was just like back home, only louder and with more candles. He didn't notice the two figures watching him from a rooftop across the street. They were cloaked in chameleon mesh, blending perfectly with the smoky stonework. They moved with a lethal grace that betrayed their transhuman nature. "Target confirmed," one of the figures whispered into a vox bead, his voice a low growl. "He is exactly as the Inquisitor described. Unremarkable." "Appearances are deceiving, brother," the second figure replied. "The Tyranid fleet is gone. The Cornate champion is dead. This man is a nexus of impossible events." He adjusted the grip on his bolt gun. "The librarian will arrive soon. Until then, we watch. And if he shows any sign of corruption, we end him." Satama, oblivious to the eyes of the angels of death upon him, just wished the tailor would hurry up. He was starting to get hungry again. The arrival of the Phalanx of Terra was not subtle. It did not slip into orbit like the Tyranid hive ships had. It arrived with the thunderous declaration of Imperial might. It transitioned from the warp at the system's edge, a fortress monastery of rock and adamantium the size of a small moon. Its arrival displaced enough real space to create gravitational tides that troubled the oceans of Veus Magna. Its macro cannons, each the size of a hive spire, tracked silently in the void, a promise of annihilation to any who would oppose the Emperor's will. From its launch bays, a single Thunderhawk gunship descended. It was a brick flying on brute force, painted the stoic yellow of the Imperial Fists chapter, its armored hull scarred from centuries of war. It roared down through the atmosphere, a herald of judgment, heading straight for the governor's palace. Governor Hellbane was practically vibrating with terror on the landing pad. He had never seen an Astartes in person. Few mortals had. They were myths, legends, the Emperor's own angels of death made flesh. Inquisitor Hellbrand stood beside him, his face a stoic mask, though his broken ribs ached in anticipation. He knew what was coming. He had invited it. The Thunderhawk landed with a ground-shaking crash, its assault ramp slamming down onto the ferrocrete. Steam hissed from its vents. From the dark interior, giants emerged. There were 5 of them. They stood 8 feet tall, encased in suits of Mark 7 Aquila power armor that was thick enough to shrug off anti-tank rounds. Their armor was painted the bright yellow of their chapter, adorned with purity seals and the stone fist icon of the Imperial Fists. They moved with a heavy, grinding purpose, the servos in their joints growling with each step. They were led by a warrior whose armor was bedecked with campaign honors and a flowing, crimson cloak. His helmet was removed, revealing a face carved from granite, scarred and weathered. With eyes that had seen 10,000 years of war, Captain Darnath Lysander, first captain of the Imperial Fists, had come to Veus Magna. Hellbrand stepped forward, bowing stiffly. "Lord Captain Lysander, the Inquisition welcomes you to Veus Magna. Your swift arrival is commended." Lysander stopped, his gaze sweeping over the Inquisitor and the trembling governor like a targeting cogitator. His voice was a deep rumble, like boulders grinding together deep underground. "Inquisitor Hellbrand," Lysander said, "we received your data. The threat assessment is ... extreme. Where is the anomaly?" "He is currently out," Hellbrand said, trying to sound diplomatic. "He went into the Hive City for a walk." Lysander's brow furrowed. "A walk? The world is threatened by the archenemy, and this being goes for a stroll?" "He is unconventional, Lord Captain," Hellbrand said. "As I stated in my report, he does not share our priorities." "Then we will find him," Lysander stated. He turned to one of his squad, a warrior whose armor was covered in psychic hoods and runic wards, the librarian. "Brother Epistolary, can you locate his psychic signature?" The librarian, Epistolary Antias, closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind into the swirling currents of the warp. He stood for a moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, his eyes snapped open, filled with a strange mixture of confusion and alarm. "I cannot, brother captain," Antias reported, his voice hollow. "It is not that he is shielded. It is that ... There is nothing there. No soul echo. No presence in the immaterium. It is as if he does not exist at all." The Space Marines exchanged glances. To be a blank, a pariah with no soul, was a rare and terrifying mutation. Yet this being possessed godlike physical power. The contradiction was deeply unsettling to their ordered minds. "He is a void," Lysander growled. "An abomination against nature. Or," Helbrand interjected quietly, "a weapon untouched by the warp, a pure physical force in a galaxy of madness." Lysander looked at the Inquisitor, his eyes hard. "We shall see. Lead us to him, Inquisitor. Let us measure the worth of this saint." Saitama was having a pretty good day. All things considered, he'd gotten his cape patched, the tailor had refused payment, insisting it was a holy duty, and he'd found a pair of red rubber, dishwashing gloves at a hardware store that were a decent substitute for his old ones. He was walking back up through the mid-hive, munching on a stick of roasted rat lizard he'd bought from a street vendor. The crowds were still following him, chanting and singing, but he was getting used to the noise. It was just background radiation at this point. He turned a corner into a wide plaza and stopped. The crowd behind him gasped and fell silent. Blocking his path were 5 giants in yellow armor. They stood like statues, their bolters held across their chests, their very presence radiating an aura of indomitable power. Saitama finished chewing his lizard stick and tossed the stick into a nearby waste reclamation unit. He wiped his mouth with the back of his new rubber glove. "Oh hey," he said, looking up at the towering warriors. "Cool cosplay. Are you guys with the governor?" Captain Lysander took a step forward, the ground trembling beneath his armored boot. He looked down at the small bald man in the cheap yellow suit. The man looked utterly pathetic, weak, and yet, the data. "I am Captain Darnath Lysander of the Imperial Fists," the Astartes stated, his voice booming across the silent plaza. "We are the Emperor's Angels of Death." Saitama blinked. "Angels, huh? You guys look heavy to fly." He pointed at the fist icon on Lysander's shoulder pauldron. "And what's with the fist? Are you guys a punching club or something?" The insult to their chapter heraldry was so casual, so profound, that the Space Marines behind Lysander bristled, their fingers tightening on their bolter triggers. Lysander held up a hand to restrain them. He stared at Saitama, analyzing him with a tactical mind honed by centuries of warfare. There was no fear in the man's eyes, no awe, only a mild bovine curiosity. "We are the defenders of humanity," Lysander said coldly. "And we have come to judge you, anomaly. By what right do you wield power that belongs only to the divine? What is your purpose on this world?" Saitama sighed. It was always the same questions. "Look, buddy," he said, scratching his ear. "I don't have a purpose. I'm just a guy who's a hero for fun. I punched some bugs, I slapped a noisy guy with an axe. That's it. Can I go now? I have a lot of noodles waiting for me." Lysander's eyes narrowed. The sheer banality of the answer was infuriating. This creature had slain a hive tyrant and banished a chaos champion, acts of legend, and he spoke of them like taking out the trash. "You mock the Emperor's work with your flippancy," Lysander growled. "Your power is a danger to this world. If you will not submit to Imperial authority, you must be contained." He raised his massive power fist, the energy field crackling to life around the adamantium fingers. "Prepare yourself, anomaly," Lysander declared. "The Sons of Dorn will test your mettle." Sabaname looked at the giant glowing fist, then back up at Lysander's stony face. "Is this going to take long?" he asked. "My noodles are going to get cold." The tension in the plaza could have cracked Ferrocrete. The crowd of civilians had retreated to the edges of the square, watching in breathless terror as their saint faced down the Emperor's own. Angels of Death. Captain Lysander did not hesitate, and Astartes did not posture. They acted. He lunged forward, his power fist swinging in a devastating arc aimed squarely at Sama's chest. The blow was pulled. Lysander intended to incapacitate, not kill, to test the anomaly's durability, but it still carried enough force to punch through a bulkhead. Saitama didn't even blink. He just raised his left hand, clad in his new red rubber glove, and caught the fist. Crack dash boom. The impact sounded like a thunderclap. A shockwave rippled outwards, kicking up dust and debris. The ground beneath their feet spiderwebbed with cracks for 10 meters in every direction. Lysander's eyes widened slightly. His fist, powered by servo muscles and an energy field that could disrupt matter on a molecular level, had been stopped cold. It was like punching a mountain. "That's a pretty good glove," Saitama remarked, looking at the rubber. "Doesn't even feel hot." The other 4 Space Marines, seeing their captain's attack batted aside like a child's toy, reacted instantly. Their training took over. They fanned out, raising their Godwin pattern bolters. "Hold fire!" Lysander roared, but it was too late. The Space Marines were already committing to the engagement. BLAM. A volley of mass reactive bolt shells, each the size of a fist, screamed toward Saitama. These were weapons designed to tear apart heavily armored infantry, to turn Xeno's horrors into bloody mist. Saitama sighed. He started swatting. His hands moved in a blur, moving faster than the hypersonic projectiles. He slapped the bolt shells out of the air, one by one. They didn't explode on contact with his hands. They were simply deflected, sent spinning wildly into the surrounding abandoned buildings, where they detonated with deafening crashes, blowing out storefronts and crumbling masonry. "Hey, watch where you're shooting!" Saitama yelled over the noise. "You're gonna break something." The Space Marines, seeing their bolter fire was ineffective, switched tactics. They dropped their ranged weapons and drew their chainswords and combat knives, charging in a coordinated assault. They were a whirlwind of ceramite and roaring blades, a force that had broken armies. Saitama dodged them with the minimum amount of effort required. He sidestepped a chainsword thrust, ducked under a combat knife swipe, and casually leaned away from a shoulder charge. It looked less like a fight and more like a man trying to avoid bumping into furniture in the dark. "You guys are really persistent," Saitama commented, weaving through the deadly dance of Astartes' blades. Lysander, recovering from his initial shock, saw the futility of the squad's attack. This being was not just durable. His reaction speeds were incomprehensible. "Fall back," Lysander ordered, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "Regroup on me." The Space Marines instantly obeyed, disengaging and falling back to form a defensive line around their captain. They were breathing heavily, their armor venting heat, but Saitama hadn't even broken a sweat. Saitama stood in the center of the plaza, surrounded by shell casings and ruined pavement. He looked at the Astartes, a look of mild disappointment on his face. "Is that it?" he asked. "I thought you guys were supposed to be the best." Lysander glared at him, his face a mask of cold fury. He had underestimated the anomaly. He had allowed his men to be humiliated. "You possess great power, anomaly," Lysander admitted, his voice grinding like stone. "But power without purpose is meaningless. You are a child playing with a loaded bolter." He raised his storm shield, activating its energy field. He hefted his thunder hammer, the weapon crackling with immense electrical energy. "I will not hold back this time," Lysander declared. "Defend yourself, or be undone." He charged. This was no probing strike. This was the full fury of a first captain of the Imperial Fists. a warrior who had slain demon princes and orc warlords in single combat. He brought the thunder hammer down in an overhead smash that would have cracked a titan's armor. Sama watched the hammer come down. It was slow. Everything was so slow that he decided to end it. He didn't punch. He didn't slap. He just poked. He extended his right index finger and jabbed it forward. Meeting the descending head of the thunder hammer, ping. The sound was comically small, like a spoon tapping a glass, but the result was cataclysmic. The thunder hammer didn't just stop. The force of Scientova's finger poke transmitted through the weapon, through Lysander's arms, and into his entire armored frame. The ancient, master-crafted thunder hammer shattered into a million pieces of electrified metal. Lysander was launched backward as if he had been hit by a speeding land raider. He flew across the plaza, crashing through the stone facade of the planetary governor's administrative building. He didn't stop there. He punched through 3 interior walls before finally coming to rest, buried in a pile of rubble in the central filing room. The other Space Marine stood frozen, staring at the hole in the building where their invincible captain had just vanished. They looked back at Saitama, who was inspecting his finger. Saitama said. I think I got a hangnail. He looked up at the remaining Astartes. So anyone else want to try? The Space Marines didn't move. They were warriors who knew no fear, but they also knew impossibility when they saw it. To continue this fight was not courage. It was suicide. Slowly, deliberately, the librarian, Epistolary Antias, lowered his force staff. The others followed suit, powering down their chains words. We yield, Antias said, his voice hollow. Saitama nodded. Okay, cool. He turned and started walking back towards the palace, stepping over the rubble. Tell your captain sorry about the hammer, he called back over his shoulder. And the building. As he walked away, the crowd of civilians who had watched the entire spectacle in stunned silence erupted. It wasn't a cheer of triumph, but a roar of religious ecstasy. They fell to their knees, weeping and praying, their faith in the saint, now absolute and unshakable. Helbrant watched from a high balcony in the palace, his face pale. He had hoped the Astartes would humble the anomaly, or at least expose his limits. Instead, they had just canonized him. He watched as Lysander pulled himself from the rubble of the administration building. His armor dented and scarred, his helmet missing, his face a mask of profound, earth-shattering humiliation. The Inquisitor turned away from the balcony, his mind racing. The physical threat of the Tyranids was gone. The immediate threat of chaos had been repulsed. But now, the Imperium faced a new threat. A threat that didn't come from the warp or the void, but from a bald man in a yellow suit who just wanted to eat noodles in peace. And Helbrand had no idea how to stop it. The humiliating defeat of Captain Lysander and his squad sent shockwaves through the Imperial hierarchy on Veus, Magna that were far more damaging than any Tyranid invasion in the governor's palace. The mood was one of terrified paralysis. Governor Helbane was catatonic, spending his days praying in his private chapel, and his nights weeping into his pillow. The idea that a mana simple, unaugmented man could humble the Emperor's angels of death was a theological impossibility that his mind refused to process. The ecclesiarchy was in full-blown panic mode. Cardinal Drovan, who had so eagerly embraced the saint narrative when it was convenient, now found himself riding a tiger. The cult he had helped foster was growing beyond his control. Street preachers were openly declaring that the Astartes were flawed, that the Inquisition was blind, and that only the one-punch saint truly represented the Emperor's will. It is heresy in its purest form. Drovan raved in a closed-door meeting with Helbrand. They are worshipping the man, not the divine power he wields. They are placing him above the institutions of the Imperium. Inquisitor Helbrand, his ribs still aching, sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. And whose fault is that, Cardinal? You were the one who slapped a halo on him the moment he punched a Carnifex. I was trying to channel their faith. Drovan sputtered. To use him as a rallying point against the Xenos. I didn't expect him to treat the Imperial fists like unruly children. Hellbrand finished for him. Yes, that was unexpected. He looked at the other man in the room. Captain Lysander stood by the window, staring out at the Hive City below. He had not spoken since pulling himself from the rubble of the administration building. His armor had been repaired, the dents smoothed out, but the damage to his pride was far more severe. Lord Captain, Hellbrand said quietly. Your assessment? Lysander turned slowly. His face was a mask of granite, but his eyes burned with a cold, focused fury. He is not of the warp, Lysander stated, his voice a low rumble. Epistolary Antaeus has confirmed it repeatedly. His soul is absent, a void. Yet he is not a pariah in the traditional sense. He does not dampen psychic energy. He simply ignores it. He paused, his gaunted hand tightening on the hilt of a new power sword. His physical strength is beyond categorization. I have seen Primarchs in the Hololithic records. Even they did not possess such casual, effortless power. He is a singularity. A break in the logic of the universe. And his allegiance? Hellbrand asked. He has none, Lysander said with absolute conviction. He served us against the Tyranids because they were annoying. He fought the Chaos Champion because he interrupted his meal. He fought us because we were in his way. He is a force of pure, undirected caprice. And therefore, Drovan interjected, a supreme danger. He must be destroyed. Lysander looked at the Cardinal with undisguised contempt. Destroyed? How, priest? Will you pray him to death? Shall we throw more bolter shells at him to tickle his skin? I struck him with the full fury of Dorn, and I broke my hammer on his finger. The captain turned back to Hellbrand. He cannot be destroyed by any means we possess here. Perhaps an exterminatus bombardment. But even then, I am not certain. Exterminatus is off the table, Hellbrand said sharply. Veus Magna is a vital industrial hub. We just saved it. I'm not going to burn it down now. Then what do we do? Hellbane whimpered from the doorway, where he had been lurking. Hellbrand stood up, wincing as his ribs protested. We do what the Imperium always does when faced with an insurmountable threat it cannot destroy. We contain it. We co-opt it. And we lie about it. He looked at the three men. The official narrative is this. The Saint was an avatar of the Emperor's wrath, summoned by the faithful in their hour of need. He completed his divine task by scourging the Xenos and the heretic. His test of the Astartes was a divine lesson in humility, reminding even the angels of death that their power is nothing compared to the master of mankind. And now? Drovan asked. Where is he now? Now, Hellbrand continued, his task is complete. The Avatar has ascended, returned to the Emperor's side. You mean he left? Lysander asked, a flicker of hope in his voice. No, Hellbrand said grimly. I mean we are going to make sure he leaves. And he is never coming back. He turned to Lysander. Captain, your mission has changed. You are no longer here to fight the anomaly. You are here to escort him. Escort him where? Away, Hellbrand said. Far away. To the edge of the galaxy. To the ghoul stars. To the Eye of Terror itself, for all I care. Just get him off this planet and keep him occupied until we can figure out a permanent solution. He looked out the window at the city, where the cult of the Saint was growing stronger by the hour. We need to give the people their miracle, Hellbrand whispered. And then we need to bury it before it buries us. Satama was in his room, finishing the last cup of his spicy beef noodles. He was starting to get sick of them. Honestly, there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find Captain Lysander standing there, full armor on, helmet under his arm. The Space Marine looked like he would rather be facing a horde of demons than standing in this hallway. "Oh hey," Saitama said. "You're the hammer guy. Did you get a new one?" Lysander's jaw clenched. "Anomaly," he stated formally. "Your presence is required. You have been retasked. Retasked?" Saitama asked. "Does it involve fighting?" "Yes," Lysander lied. "There are greater threats, further out in the void. Threats that require your unique capabilities." Saitama's eyes lit up slightly. "Really? Like strong threats? Stronger than the bugs?" "Much stronger," Lysander assured him, hating himself for the deception. "The greatest threats in the galaxy." Saitama thought about it. He was getting bored here. The noodles were running out, and the people were getting weirdly worshipful. A road trip to fight some real monsters sounded like a good change of pace. "Okay," Saitama said, tossing his empty noodle cup into an overflowing bin. "I'm in. When do we leave?" "Immediately," Lysander said. "My ship is waiting." 20 minutes later, Saitama was walking up the ramp of the Thunderhawk gunship, his white cape fluttering in the wind. A massive crowd had gathered outside the palace gates, cheering and weeping as their saint departed. "He goes to fight for us among the stars." Cardinal Droven's voice boomed over the voxcasters. "Pray for his victory. Pray for the Emperor's champion." Saitama waved awkwardly at the crowd. "Bye, guys. Thanks for the noodles." He stepped into the dark interior of the gunship. The ramp sealed behind him with a hydraulic hiss. Lysander sat opposite him, strapped into a crash seat, his bolter across his knees. He looked at the bald man, this creature of impossible power and banal desires. "Where are we going first?" Saitama asked, looking out the small viewport as the Thunderhawk lifted off on pillars of fire. Lysander looked straight ahead, his face a stony mask. "To the edge of the map," the captain replied. "Where there be monsters,"